Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. There's quite a lot of you, and we have a heavy topic to discuss, but I hope to make it fun. It's obviously a great honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here today to moderate a panel of distinguished experts and policymakers and economists and journalists. So very quickly, we have Marek Dietl, who is the head of the Polish Warsaw Stock Exchange. We have Marcin Sandbu, a top-flying Financial Times journalist, but he is also half Polish. So if you want to talk to him afterwards, he needs to catch a train, but you may still catch a few words with him afterwards. We have Mateusz Walewski, a chief economist of BGK, and obviously Paweł Borys, the savior of the Polish economy post-COVID, the head of PFR. So what we want to talk today about is, and the key reason why we are here to have this debate is to answer a question: what has gone wrong with the world? We were all hoping, we're all counting that the world is getting better and better, and over the last few years at least, it has become worse and worse. In particular, it has become worse because poverty has been booming, inequality has been increasing, and social mobility has been declining. The estimates by my own employer, the World Bank, that suggest that 100 million people around the world have become poor again because of the crises. The inequality has also increased, measured both in terms of inequality between countries and also within countries. So the key question we want to ask today to all the panelists is: what has gone wrong, and what can we do to fix it? How can we make the world a better place again? And let me kick off the debate with Martin about a question of global economic policies over the last 2 years. There's a lot of debate in Poland, in Europe, and globally about whether what the governments have done over the past 2 years have been too much. There's been too much printing of money, there's been too much fiscal expansion, there were the wrong type of reforms, and we end up with high inflation that is immiserating the global poor and increasing inequality. So what is your take? What has gone right and what has gone wrong?
Thanks, Marcin, and thanks everyone. Great to be here. Look, I think I would call the policy response to the pandemic a qualified success, but a big qualified success. In rich countries, you had a lot of schemes to compensate those who were the worst hit, who were the people already worst off, people in manual work, on lower wages, who were both more exposed to the health danger and also more exposed economically. Big support packages compensated for a lot of those dangers and losses. Not fully, it wasn't enough, but it was the right thing to do and almost enough. Second, the macroeconomic policies, which you referred to a bit, I think have been the greatest success. I mean, nobody would have expected such a quick recovery in jobs, for example, compared to any previous crisis. Some countries are now above, the US is above its pre-pandemic GDP trajectory. Not just that it's caught up, it's ahead of where it was expected to be. And that's because of macroeconomic policy. I think the inflation is really from the supply side. Third, not a success, is the international response for poorer countries and emerging countries. So it's gone well in advanced countries. It's gone very badly in poorer countries, which did not have the fiscal ability to do what rich countries do and did not get enough help either economically or in terms of vaccine provision and sharing. So you had this divergence between rich countries and poor countries that's very worrying.
Sure, brother. There's a lot of people that would argue that because of the way the governments have dealt with the crisis, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. So in retrospect, is there anything else that you would have done differently?
Look, I think that's true at a global level. Rich countries have got richer and poor countries have got poorer, relatively speaking. We don't have much global economic governance. We should have more. There should have been more burden sharing, more support through the IMF, through the World Bank, and so on, and especially the vaccines, of course. But within rich countries, I don't really agree. Again, the US has gone the furthest here. And look at the poor in the US. You know, we look at high wage growth, high inflation, maybe real wages fall. But the lowest income people, they're the ones who've had the highest wage increases, well above inflation. So in the last 2 years, the policies have on the whole been inequality reducing, if you look at wages at least in the US.
All right, great points. Now, let me turn it over to Paweł, who, as head of P for PEVED, has been one of those that has helped deal with the COVID crisis in Poland. There's a few that call him the savior of the Polish economy because of the big stimulus that P4R has masterminded. So the question to you is, 2 years after the beginning of the COVID crisis, and from the perspective of the impact of the policies of PFR on poverty and equality, what are the lessons learned, and what are the things that you would have done the same way, but also the things that you would done differently?
Good afternoon. May I have one general remark? So, generally speaking, we have two types of inequalities. One is between countries, and the second is within country. And when you look over the last 2-3 decades, the world was quite successful in reducing inequalities between countries because of the globalization. Asia boomed significantly and catch up in terms of the income and wealth with the rest of the world. However, we observe increasing inequality within countries all around the world. And of course, COVID, because of the recession and previous financial crisis, increased the risk of further increase in inequalities. The second remark is that I don't like term inequality because we are not equal. And I believe that now we rather promote diversity. And this is not possible that we all be equal because we are different. We have different skills, we have different race. And so this is not about being equal and inequalities, but this is about fairness and justice, so that everyone have a fair stake in economic growth and development, depend on their contribution to this process. Regarding PFR, of course, what I was afraid mostly 2 years ago when COVID started is that many countries, including Poland, could go into direction of south of Europe during the financial crisis in 2008-2009, which means that we will have the very severe recession, which will result in high unemployment, some bankruptcies of firms, so we'll lose the growth momentum and growth potential for a decade. Because as you know, Spain haven't recovered after the financial crisis for a decade and entered the COVID with 16% unemployment and more than 30% unemployment rate between young people. So I think that what was the priority for all measures which we have implemented to avoid the scenario of South Europe to lose the growth potential for many, many years. And I believe we succeeded because we have a strong labor market, strong corporate segment. Of course, it has a cost. One is higher debt, the second, to some extent, inflation, because I agree the inflation mostly comes from the supply side. But when we stabilize the economy, and I believe this is achievable within 1-2 years, we still will have significant potential to grow for the next decade, and we have avoided very negative long-term scenarios.
But what would you have done differently? Anything?
I believe that we did our job properly because we have given the financing to firms, not in the model which was implemented in US. US allowed for big unemployment growth and give the checks to people. And this is very inflationary. What we have done, we have given money to mostly micro, small, and medium enterprises to feel them secure and let them keep proper liquidity, not fire people, have a good balance sheet, which is not inflationary. So we believe that and it was very, I believe, efficient system, which resulted in situation that among our beneficiaries, it was 350,000 firms. They increased employment during COVID by 4%. So I believe that we have achieved our goals. Now, unfortunately, we have entered another phase due to the turbulence caused by aggressive policy of Russia.
Sure, thanks a lot. Now, a question to Marek. So Paweł doesn't like the term inequality. He talks about fairness and justice. So what about the stock markets? I mean, everyone would be scapegoating stock markets as the ultimate mechanism through which millionaires become billionaires and some people lose their shirts. So what is the role you think the stock markets can have in fighting inequality? And what is the way you can actually help those that are usually not part of the stock markets at all?
So first classic role of stock exchanges to combat inequalities is via democratization. It's very difficult to be investing in private equity fund as long as you are not high net worth individual. But with little money, you can be investor on a stock exchange. So stock exchanges are democratic, are also meritocratic. So those who are smart usually can get better investment results. And even the state, the other role of PFR is moderating of the pension reform in Poland, and actually PFR gave opportunity to get richer through the stock exchange to everyone who is employed in Poland. So it's actually very democratic approach, and for sure those who joined independently of the wealth bracket or wage rate bracket, those who joined the pension scheme, the newly invented pension scheme, will increase their wealth due to the state support and due to employer support. So basically, it's a mechanism to reduce the wealth inequalities. The second aspect of stock exchanges is something what is you can witness watching movies like Big Short or something like this, or any other movies, Capital City or whatever. It's this intraday trading or very intense trading and trading volatility. Basically, stock exchanges, you make money on the stock exchange when there is a high volatility, so changes in the pricing of securities. And in this second aspect, it is not inequalities reducing or fairness increasing job. It's rather a job for hedge funds, brokers, and the whole community around capital markets. And the question is, and in my keynote before our panel, I mentioned that if we should not consider taxing volatility. If there's increased volatility, investment bank, brokers, hedge funds, everyone makes money out of a sudden event, usually adverse sudden events. So maybe we should find a way to transfer portion of this extra wealth or profit achieved from the increased volatility to those who were adversely impacted by the event. And referring to what Marcin said about poor countries, actually, out of this COVID, also investors, stock exchanges, brokers, investment banks made record profits, yeah? Because of the volatility in this market. And maybe if there is a transfer, wealth transfer mechanism, for example, in case of COVID, buying vaccines for the poor countries out of the tax on volatility, the world will become more equal. Thank you.
But then a question, but for the next round is, if you are a poor person in Poland, how you as the head of the stock market could help me be part of the game? Because the issue is that the rich are getting richer because they have huge capital gains on their stocks. But if I'm poor and I have not enough of assets to even be part of the game, by definition, I'll become poor. So I'll leave you with this and I'll come back. In the meantime, I have a question to Mateusz. I was attentively listening to your boss on the panel earlier this morning, the head of BGK, and she said that the world will never be the same again, and we all need to wake up. And I think she also meant it in a way of what do we do with inequality, what do we do with fairness, what do we do with poverty? So what are your ideas as the chief economist of BGK? Ideally, 3 most original ideas of what would you do to make the world a better place, starting from Poland, Europe, and globally.
It's a hard question, but maybe I will not come up with 3 ideas. I know it's some kind of ideal number of 3, triangle and so on, but maybe 1 idea would be enough. Frankly speaking, I don't think that this real idea we can repair the world with lies in the area of economics. It's somewhere in economics, yes, but not in the narrow sense of economic policy, fiscal policy, tax policy, or not macroeconomic policy for sure. Macroeconomic policy cannot do much about inequality. I'm sure of that. It can, it's like it's like painting the wall with the anti-mold paint. It's the macroeconomic policy. But then if the wall is rotten inside, and if it's keep rotting inside, the paint will not help you, even if it's anti-mold paint. Yes? So we need this anti-mold paint. If something happens, we did it during COVID crisis, and it worked. But then we have to repair. Yes, and it's not the economy we have to repair. It's not economic policy. It's even not institutions meant by law. I worked in many countries, and they have all similar law, copies of either American or European law, depending on who was the main advisor there. And it didn't happen. It didn't help. Yes, because the law are interpreted as they are on the field, and these are people who decide what given institution really means. Yes, if you write the custom service code.
So one single thing you would do. Let's imagine
yes, that's you ask me for 3. I would have only 1, so I have spare time to speak about reasons. Yes, okay. But then one idea is not in economics. It's definitely somewhere in politics, somewhere in behavior of people, of corporations. Obviously, you can regulate it, but you cannot make corporates to really share wealth, not to hide taxes in tax havens. You can try to do it by law, but it has to be somewhere in nature. Yes, if it's the only law, and then even if it's some global commitment, you just end up with PR. Yes, it's like, it's not coincidence that most of CSR departments in big corporations are close to PR departments, because this is PR. Yes, and the rest of the hard business is hard business. So if we do not incorporate CSR, ESG into hard business decisions, yes, it has to be the will of those who run corporations, we will not improve the world. And obviously it's idealistic, so that's why the world is not heaven, yes, because we are not, we are just humans. But if you really ask me what should be done, that's what really has to be done, and just changing policies, especially macroeconomic policies or fiscal policies, will not change much.
Good, thank you. That's a very good take. Martin, what do you think? You wrote the whole book, which is actually a great book, by the way, The Economics of Belonging, and you had a couple of very specific economic ideas. I think Mateusz would disagree with you. So what if it's, because he says it's not about economics, but if it's about economics, what are the type of ideas that you would promote to make the world less unequal and to eliminate poverty?
Well, the ones I would do are, first, don't panic about inflation. Continue with a high-pressure economy, macroeconomic stimulus. 2, I would introduce a carbon tax and dividend. We need a carbon taxes because we need to get through the green transition, but redistribute that money a bit like a universal basic income so that those who suffer from that transition are compensated. I would introduce a progressive net wealth tax, so a tax that's assessed on your total wealth every year, because I said the pandemic hadn't been so bad for income inequality, but it's true, it's increased asset values, so those with assets got wealthier. And that's a better way to tax capital than other ways. And I would try to use the crash course we've all had in working remotely to have policies to try to bring some of the high-paying service jobs, the sort of jobs all of us have, to smaller places, because every country is suffering from a regional inequality problem, and we have a unique opportunity to use what we were all forced to do in a more conscious way to spread the good jobs. Those are 4 things, I think, so I'll stop there.
Very good ideas. Paweł, do you like the idea of a net wealth tax that Marek would implement at the stock market and just every year take 1% off of the assets and you get 99% what is left? That would be a great way to reduce inequality, no?
I advocated for volatility tax. Martin was advocating for progressive tax on wealth.
So Paweł, what do you think about the idea of a net wealth tax, and what might be your other most original ideas of what should we do going forward?
Another question, please, because as I said, I don't believe that we have to be all equal, because we are not. And what I believe that what is most important is to level playing field, that everybody have the same chances to contribute in the development. And the critical thing to have the same chances is to focus on education, which should be free, should be modern, and this is the key thing that could increase mobility between incomes, growth, wealth level. So this is critical. The second thing, because I like the idea of libertarian paternalism. So this is the concept that people always need to have a free choice, but the aim of the public policy is to give people the right incentives. So education, together with the good, stable policies which gives people right incentives, and people choose whether they would like to work hard or not, to earn more or less, to educate or not. People have to decide, but they need to have a choice.
Good. Before I go back to Marek about his idea of a tax on volatility and net wealth tax, and you could be the one that can actually make it happen. Mateusz, what about the idea of net wealth tax? Would it make sense? Would it help reduce inequality?
No, I tried to figure out the idea of catastrophe tax, which is close to net wealth tax. And these ideas sound very nice on paper and on theory, but then how do you calculate net wealth? And that's the problem, because you can tax something which is tangible. And net wealth, in fact, even if you think it's not, but if you think about it more deeply, especially if you think about a tax lawyer, for example, that the net wealth is never tangible. So it's really just very hard to put effective and really working net wealth tax. So yes, you have to try. You have to, I also believe, because, by changing human nature, I also mean building incentives, that's what Paweł said. Yes? So you can do something, but on the incentives level, but not on the regulation, hard regulation level.
All right, good. Marek, so can you tell us more about this tax on volatility idea? Would it help? How would it help reduce inequality? Why should we care?
So let me start with your question after my first intervention. So basically, my message would be regarding how to reduce the wealth inequalities. I mean, government spends billions, trillions, and so on reducing income inequalities via social transfers, but spend very little on how to reduce the wealth inequalities. Exception, Polish government, PFR invented the system, our pension system, where there's lump sum support from the state. So basically those at the lower income brackets proportionally get more because it's a lump sum. Yeah? So, and this is the fundamentally very good idea, and I'm really convinced that what Paweł also said, if you support people reducing inequality of wealth plus very good education, I will top up it with the affordable healthcare services. Then you have, via a channel of human capital, you can compensate the difference, or partially compensate the differences in the financial capital with the human capital, and of course regional differences. What Marcin also said, we have a series of exhibition on the 30 years of the Warsaw Stock Exchange, and we visit smaller cities, and I see that 1-2 good employers offering high quality value-added jobs in a 30,000 inhabitant city completely change the landscape. And I'm fully with you. I mean, and remote and so on makes it really possible. It's only the will and giving up some comfort, maybe not that good, whatever choice of restaurants or something like this, so very nominal thing. So if we get rid of selfishness, we could move to the smaller cities, which offer often quite decent life quality. To volatility tax, I don't know how exactly should it work. I would see it as a self-regulation. That's why I'm sending this week a letter to all the CEOs of all exchanges in the world, proposing that they offer for humanitarian aid for Ukraine 0.25% of their revenues, because I calculated roughly that was the extra profit earned by the exchanges through the increased volatility of due to the war. I don't know what would be the feedback, but I'm quite strongly convinced that self-regulation of the capital market institutions, so brokers, investment banks, hedge funds, and so on, and stock exchanges, can do better, and it will be as Mateusz called it, CSR subordinated to PR, but it will be a real, it will really show that we do care for the sources of our extra profit, for those who were adversely impacted by the event which caused the volatility we profit from.
Sure, thanks a lot. Martin, the last word to you.
Just some quick
I
reaction.
saw you shaking your head where you listen to our colleagues. You can speak Polish too, by the way.
Just to answer very quickly some of my view on some disagreements. First, on the moving jobs out to smaller places. If you have enabling policies, that makes it easier. It's not just kind of charity. And if the jobs move, the restaurants will follow. On the wealth tax, I agree with education and leveling the playing field. The playing field is not level when it comes to asset accumulation. If you're rich, you have access to better investment options. And we know that wealthier people have higher returns because they can invest in private equity, for example, as you mentioned. If you have zero wealth, it's much harder to get some wealth than if you have some wealth to get a lot more wealth. So a wealth tax is really a way to precisely level the playing field. And it's a better tax on capital than profit taxes, for example, because it rewards those with high returns who invest well, and it penalizes those who invest poorly because you tax the total amount, not their return. Finally, every country with an inheritance tax already measures wealth. So we do this at least once in every person's life in any case. And I submit it's actually easier to do it on a regular basis. Not easy, no tax is easy. We have complicated economies, but we're already doing it. Switzerland has a net wealth tax. If the Swiss can do it, it's probably doable.
Thanks. Let's take this discussion offline. Last one question, yes or no question to you. 5 years from now, will inequality in Poland be higher or lower? Paweł.
I believe that they will be very similar to they are now, unfortunately, because we see from the last decade that they are quite resilient trend.
Higher or lower, Mateusz?
It depends how you define it.
Okay, good. Martin?
Well, I'm just going to challenge Yuval Harari and say that the choice is in our hands. It depends what we do.
That's very good.
Marek? I think it will be lower.
All right, so I think it's a very positive, happy end to our debate. Anyway, thank you so much for everyone to joining us and giving us your time. I know there's a lot of other events going on at the same time. Big thanks to the panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.